Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's event in the Honoring Life series. This is a joint collaboration event of the Janki Foundation for Spirituality in Healthcare and the Brahma Kumaris, World Spiritual University, or in short, the Brahma Kumaris. I am Nirmala and I volunteer with both these charities, and I'm here to welcome you and share a little bit about the Honoring Life series. But before I do so, just a bit about what the Janki Foundation is and they do. It's a UK-based charity which encourages research and awareness in the field of spirituality and health. And the Brahma Kumaris is a worldwide spiritual movement dedicated to personal transformation and world renewal. So before we start our topic for today, I'd just like to let you know that videos and mics will be off throughout the session. And later on, the chat box will be open for you to pose any questions or comments to the speakers. So this event is also being live streamed on Facebook. So special welcome to those who are joining us on the Janki Foundation Facebook page and the Brahma Kumaris Facebook page. The Honoring Life series started in the middle of 2021 to support people during the pandemic. And so far we've done at least 4 events. The first event focused on facing the effects of loss and loved ones. And this was followed by the Honoring Life dealing with loss, trauma, and grief. We then had the Honoring Life Gift of Life event, and then the Honoring Life Losing Hope event. So if you're interested in any of these, all these events can be viewed from the Janki Foundation website under past events. The recording is there if you would like that. Today, we conclude this Honoring Life series as we look to the future with an exploration of hope, purpose, and newness. We have Sister Janki, Deacon Sutton, and Dr. Sarah Eagger, who will be sharing their vision of an emerging new era. So I'd like to welcome our moderator for today's event, so Philippa Blackham. So welcome, Philippa. And just a little bit to introduce Philippa. Philippa is an award-winning documentary maker and radio presenter. She's worked for the BBC Radio for many years and as a staff reporter and presenter for Women's Hour on the BBC Radio 4. And she's currently working on a national project called 100 Women of Spirit, which explores and celebrates the world of women and spirituality. And Philippa is a student of the Brahma Kumaris and has been practicing Raj Yoga meditation since 1982. So Philippa, it's really nice to have you with us. So thank you for taking this role. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Nirmala, for that lovely introduction. And it's lovely to have so many of you join us for the concluding event in this series. And I'd like to just honor the Honoring Life series because it has done such a tremendous job in giving people support at a time of real need. And in many ways, the pandemic has been an opportunity for each of us to offer support to those who we might not normally come into contact with, neighbours, friends, relatives. We've all been on this journey together, and it's initiatives like this Honoring Life series that has supported people to give the best of themselves to others. So really, it's been something very special. And today's programme adds a note of newness, and a note of looking to the future, of what we are moving into now that the pandemic is beginning to fade into the background. So there's plenty to discuss, and I hope you'll be able to stay with us. There will be a chance for asking questions towards the end of this event, so do please store your questions up, and I'll give you a chance to pose them, and I'll put those questions on your behalf. But let me introduce you to our panelists for today's discussion. We have the return of Sister Janki, who was with you earlier in the series. And of course, Sister Janki is the additional administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris. And she has followed the path of Raj Yoga meditation the whole of her adult life, becoming an inspiring teacher for countless individuals right around the world. Normally, Sister Janki is based at the international headquarters in London at Global Cooperation House. But today, Sister Janki, you're joining us from the main headquarters in Mount Abu, India, in Rajasthan. And of course, Sister Janki, you were there at the beginning of the pandemic when this whole journey began. What's the difference now that you're returning these years later? Is there a very different mood? Does the energy feel as if it has shifted and moved on to a new phase?
Thank you, Philippa, and Om Shanti, and hello to everyone. And yes, it's definitely moved into a new phase. When I was here 2 years ago, at that time we had a few thousand people on the campus, but everybody was just literally locked in. We couldn't move at all. It was not possible to go anywhere. And there was a lot of fear around, uncertainty about what was going to happen, how things would move. And especially because India has such a huge population, people were very concerned about how the government and health officials would be able to cope. But in fact, I think with the vaccine coming on and everybody observing the safeguarding rules, it wasn't as bad as some people were expecting. But of course, now today, most of the restrictions are gone. And yes, if you have symptoms, you still go for a test. And also if you're going to travel to countries outside India, then again, you're tested. But the mood of the people seems to be very hopeful now. It feels as if it's the end of a big tunnel, and now we're out into the light again. And a lot of people now are traveling to India, especially to Mount Abu also. And so we keep hearing of numbers swelling as they make their program to come. Last week, we had 300 people, 350, and most of them had their time here on retreat and have left. But now we have a group of around 400 people coming. And that's just from countries outside India. From within India, we have a gathering of 20,000 that's expected. And so now there isn't that fear that you can't have gatherings. And there's a feeling that there have been lots of lessons learned from the pandemic. And so the silver lining has been recognizing that there's value in friendship, there's value in family, and it's important to be self-sufficient. It's important not to think too much about consumerism, but to be able to manage in the best way possible in a simple way. So I'm seeing that there's a new feeling around.
Well, that's really good to hear. And we're going to talk more about some of those silver linings very shortly. Let's also give a very warm welcome back to Deacon Jan Sutton, who was with us earlier in the series as well. Welcome to you, Jan. Great to have you. And of course, Jan is an ordained Methodist minister who came to Loughborough in 2005. She's the head of the chaplaincy at Loughborough University, and she leads a team of chaplains who represent many of the world faiths, and their team offers pastoral and spiritual support to everyone, irrespective of their faith or belief, and that's a 24/7 service available to both staff and students. So we can only imagine how busy you have been, Jan, over the past couple of years. But of course, you're now back on campus the students have returned, there's in-person teaching. What do you sense as the mood amongst the students now that they're back? Do you feel that they are stepping into a newness as well?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you all again, and I bring greetings from Loughborough University. The students are absolutely remarkable, and throughout the 2 years that of change, of being at home, being with their parents, being away from campus, the students have just been remarkable. And as they have come back onto campus, and we now have 17,800 students and 3,500 staff at Loughborough University, and on our London campus there is 1,000 students. And now they're back on campus, I've seen an increase in the way they look out for each other. They seem to go around in their groups and caring for each other, and just valuing the time that they're spending together rather than spending separately, either in their room in halls, or like I say, when they've been staying with their parents. And the whole atmosphere on campus has changed. It feels like when the students were away, it was like the campus hadn't got a soul. And now the soul has returned, and the purpose for being there. And that in itself brings the newness with it. And for me personally, I don't think there's a better time of year on campus than there is now, with all the daffodils, the crocuses, the blossom is starting to come on the trees. And that is a different kind of newness, and the sunshine seems to bring students out. I was on campus yesterday, which, as you know, isn't a teaching day, it's a weekend, but everywhere you looked, every piece of green space had students sitting, talking, and just being together.
Fantastic. I think for all of us, there is a sense of really appreciating the freedoms that we now have and the things that we can do with no restriction. I don't think we will take simple everyday pleasures for granted ever again. So it's great to hear that that mood is reflected in the young people as well. Now, of course, Sarah Eagger is joining us as well for today's conversation. Dr. Sarah Eagger, a retired consultant psychiatrist, formerly at Imperial College London, now working in her own private practice. And Sarah is the chair of the Janki Foundation, one of the sponsors of this series. It's a charity which promotes spirituality in healthcare. And in addition to that, Sarah sits on the executive committee of the Special Interest Group on Spirituality at the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the UK. And Sarah herself has practiced Raja Yoga meditation for well over 40 years. Sarah, in a way, we're talking about the silver linings that are beginning to appear in the worlds of both Sister Jayanti and Jan. But when we look at your world, the world of healthcare professionals and the stresses and strains that they have been under over the past 2 years, are we being naive to look for silver linings there, or do you think there have been some?
I think it's still very, very tough for healthcare professionals. From what my conversations with colleagues who are still working, that they're under an enormous amount of stress. And yesterday I got an email from the college asking me to write to my MP because of workforce planning, and they had all the statistics of really how long it takes to train a psychiatrist, for instance, before they can even be a consultant is 12 years. And the numbers of vacancies, the numbers of locums, which is very expensive. So many knock-on effects of how people have retired, people are leaving, and there's not enough staff to fill the gaps. And I think that's across the board in all the slots in the healthcare profession. So it is tough, and there's a lot of stress for people working at the moment. And I was even talking to another colleague who works in a child and adolescent mental health service, and I said, she was asking me to do a session on self-compassion, and she said they're a little bit, they've all been told there's a wellness person in the trust now. They've all been told they have to look after themselves. They've all been told they should be kind to themselves, and they said they're getting a little bit of compassion fatigue in a sense, because it's a systemic situation, and as individuals, I guess we have personal choices and we really need to look after ourselves, but the system needs to also be looking after us as well. So I think all those issues are still up for grabs.
Well, I think if nothing other than just learning the lesson of self-care and self-compassion as a healthcare worker, you know, that alone is a precious outcome, in a way that there's more focus and attention on that. But if I can ask you all really about, I've heard this expression, the long tail of COVID, and that's usually used in relation to, you know, the effects that some people are still experiencing, whether that be mental health issues or financial issues, or just issues around anxiety and insecurity. But I also wonder what the long tail of COVID is in regards to ways in which we as a society have been changed forever, whether that be an openness to talk about death and dying in a new way, whether that be acceptance of change or adaptability to things in life which you thought were going to be there forever and suddenly are taken away from you. Maybe if I can start with you, Sister Janti, what would you identify as the long tail of this whole COVID experience?
I would say that the impact on minds, people's minds is still, you know, they're very afraid. In some cases I've seen, and where there's been bereavement, of course, those memories don't go away so quickly. And sometimes the separation of parents, elderly parents in care homes, for example, and there wasn't a proper farewell or a proper funeral even. So these are some of the things that have left a deep imprint in people's hearts, and they have to find a way of coming to terms with that through spirituality or through counseling in some form or another. And the other thing I'm also seeing is that there's been an economic impact. And so where there were small businesses, I've seen many, many small businesses just fold. Even here in India, I was just speaking to a particular shopkeeper, and he said, I've got all this stock still waiting. And now the tourists haven't been coming to Mount Abu in the way that they used to come. I mean, just from our own university, there would have been multi thousands coming every year. So he's now having to decide how to be able to manage life and manage things. So I see that it has left behind its long tail, as you succinctly said. And what we're trying to do is to give people hope and to inspire them and to make sure that they do see their way out of this period in which, yes, the pandemic seems to be under control, but of course there might be another wave at some point. But the other thing is that they now recognize the value of family. I see that that's become an important element. And also they see that you don't need to spend a huge amount of money to be happy. You can be happy with simple things in life, and you can be happy just being with friends and spending an evening together. And so I'm seeing that that aspect of the economy on the one side being a problem, but on the other side, realizing that it's not external things that can make you happy. It's actually inner things that can bring happiness. So we're trying to help people to cope with the bereavement, and to make them understand that whatever has happened, there's been reasons for it, but not to blame and complain and feel bitterness about it. But if today there has been a bereavement, and what you can do is to send your thoughts of love in God's remembrance, and those thoughts reach the person you love, wherever they may be, whichever journey they are on at the moment. So that's been a very important part of sharing things with people, that don't be upset, don't be angry about it, but come to terms with it. It's part of life and you have to accept it. But also there's something very specific you can do to help the one that you loved so much. You can send them your good wishes and good feelings. So I see that it's a transition period and people are managing and people are moving forward.
I've been so impressed really with all of us, with the way we have coped with these situations, and learning to extend good wishes to someone who you can't physically be with through your heart, because for many people that was the only thing they could do. You know, that's something which I think we're left with. Jan, I know for many young people, the time spent alone was a real problem. You know, people of you know, in their late teens, early 20s, young adults, you know, are not known for wanting to spend time on their own, and yet this was forced upon them. And it has left some with a slight anxiety, a social anxiety around being with others face to face, because they've got out of the habit of that kind of interaction. What do you sense as being the legacy, if you like, of COVID that you're now seeing and dealing with?
I think, Philippa, the legacy is just that. We are seeing more students who are anxious. They're anxious that they're now away from home, and with COVID still being around and about, and we're experiencing a peak at the moment, a phone call or a FaceTime isn't enough. They need to be sure for themselves and want to go home to see their loved ones, to make sure that they're okay, in a way where, you know, before the pandemic, that phone call that, yeah, I'm okay, you know, I'm not very well, but I'm going to be okay, that just isn't enough anymore. And with we've seen an increased number in students who are experiencing homesickness, particularly at the beginning of the term. You know, we were still at a point on campus then when parents literally had to unpack the car on the car park and leave their students to go into the halls on their own. So there was no the big goodbyes and the meal together before they left. They were just there from being 2 years in the room in their own home to suddenly being in a room on a campus where there was still some restrictions, but not quite as many as there had been. And we've seen an increase in the young people coming to us with the questions, there's got to be more than this. They're really seeking spiritually. And I say spiritually rather than asking about questions about religion. It is about, who am I? What am I? How do I look after this me inside? And I know the sessions that Natalie, our chaplain, runs on positive thinking, the numbers have risen to, like, we might have got 8 at a session before, and over the last couple of months she's reached 450, 500 people. Yeah, and the bereavement cafe has tripled in size. And so the students are, some of them, because of their young age, are experiencing death for the first time. And you know, in our culture here in the UK, death has been so hidden for years. It's not been spoken about openly. It's been something that is happening, but other than going to a funeral service or a service of remembrance, that is it. and now they've been faced with it, some of them multiple times, and mainly, you know, with members of their family who, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, would have still been with them today. So there's been quite a lot of challenges, but I've been encouraged by how many of the students and the staff who are openly now talking to chaplains. You know, I don't like to say, I suppose there has been benefits, but good benefits from this pandemic for us. I suppose we could say a silver lining for us is that chaplains have become more visible, and it's been recognised that we may be able to help and guide and just be with someone as a caring person who has time to listen to the concerns.
That's so interesting to see how those numbers have changed so dramatically in a relatively short space of time. And I was watching an interview on the television with quite a high profile pop star who was talking about his time in lockdown and now coming back to touring. And he's saying that he's finding himself reflecting on what is the purpose of what he's doing? What's the value of what he's doing to society? And he's saying how he feels really changed by the experience he had of being on his own more than he ever would have done as a touring pop star in his life. So that was very interesting to hear. And Sarah, the long tail of COVID in a way for you has been that you produced a book during lockdown, which is quite a long tail because it's a book that's doing incredibly well, Stillness in the Storm, which you wrote, I think, primarily to support health professionals through what they were experiencing. What are you seeing as the impact of that piece of work that you did?
Thanks, Philippa. Yes, it ties in very nicely with both what Sister Janti and Jan was saying about people seeking something deeper, and my co-author Jan Alco and I wrote it really for anyone, and it's Stillness in the Storm, 7 Tools for Dealing with Fear and Uncertainty. And it does build on some previous books that the Janki Foundation had written, this idea that there are things we can do for ourselves to help ourselves, and the journey that we undertook was something that we felt had been very helpful for ourselves. So the first step was, they're in chapters, and there are meditations also related to each theme. The first one is creating inner safety. So it's that sense, which I think both Janti and Jan alluded to, that people were thrown upon their own resources and needed to go inside. And what happens when you go inside? And for some people, that going inside can be quite a bit scary. Someone was asking me this morning, actually, they said, how can you let go of thoughts of the past? How can you actually stop thoughts that are distressing? And, you know, it's a question that a lot of people have. So to learn that art of meditation and going in to find a safe place inside when everything outside can be very scary. And of course, right now, we haven't mentioned it, but we've obviously come out of COVID, more or less. There's all the economic ramifications, but the war in Ukraine has made everyone feel very anxious, certainly in Europe still. And it's sort of like we're, you know, going from one thing to another. And so I think those lessons are still there, that ability to go within and find a safe place when all around you is quite scary for whatever reason. Being present, being able to bring yourself into the present moment. A lot of anxiety is around what you anticipate might be going to happen in the future. So really being able to bring yourself into the present moment will calm yourself down. This big lesson of self-compassion, what does it actually mean to be kind to myself? So we talk about that quite a lot. Stepping back and accepting this idea of being able to be more of a witness and observer and really accepting what's going on. Empowering myself, the tools that help me really work in a constructive way instead of a negative way with some of my challenges. Connecting, so that whole issue of connecting to family, to friends, to my community, to a higher power, this ability of us to connect and how supportive that is. And then discovering inner peace and wholeness. And that's really bringing it all together about this spiritual journey where we are asking these questions about what is my purpose in life? What is really important to me? What are my values? What am I doing here? And so that understanding of myself as a spiritual being, as a soul, how that when we experience that and understand what that means, it really reframes our whole experience of death, of what my purpose is in life, what my real strengths are, what my inner strengths are that may be able to really stand by me and support me when I'm facing these challenges. And then we just finish with a chapter on resilience, which is bringing it all together. So when I'm facing these various challenges from outside, how can I bounce back? And so I think, yes, for me, it was a lovely experience of bringing together all my own personal experiences of what's helped me when I face challenges and trying to put that into a coherent narrative, if you like, along with practical tips and meditations to help people in the journey. So it's been very gratifying to be able to do that, and hopefully it will help others facing these challenges as well.
It's a book that runs very nicely in parallel with this whole series of ways to support yourself through difficult times. So a great companion read for anyone who's on this journey that we've been discussing throughout this series. But Sister Janti, when the title for this event was put together, Hope, Purpose and Newness, I think we were imagining a world very different from the one that we're actually in right now. I think we all had this sense that if we follow the rules, if we stay in lockdown, if we wear our mask, if we do what we're told and ride it out, that we will emerge on the other side, blinking into the sunlight, and we will return to the idyll that was before. And yet what happened was almost one finished one day, and the very next day, we had war in the heart of Europe. There was no pause for breath almost. And so really my question is, are we suffering under some grand illusion that the world is going to move back into a time where everything is rosy in the garden and we can just carry on our lives as we always have? Or do you think the reality is more now that we have to expect change to be a constant part of life, and that really what we have to learn is how to change our response to these changing events rather than the events themselves?
It does feel as if there's a roller coaster, and it's one thing after another, after another, after another. And so we've scarcely recovered from everything that happened during the pandemic. And certainly the economy is nowhere near recovered. And yet, of course, now we're faced with another situation, which on the one hand, it's in Europe, so we're very concerned. And we're also, the other thing is that we now get images, all the drone images that are coming. We couldn't have had those even 10 years ago. So technology is really bringing it right into our faces. You can't run away from it. And it's on our doorstep. But the other thing is the economic impact of all of this. And, we were already expecting electricity and gas and fuel prices to go shooting up. But this is now even further, more than we ever imagined that we would have to deal with. And I think what all of this is telling me is that there's been such a decline in human values in terms of how we live our life. And it feels as if because of this, everything's crashing around us. And so I think that there's a bigger lesson to learn than just care and compassion in a sense. It's really asking the question, what are the inner core values of human life? And to what extent am I willing to give my time and attention to explore all of this and make it a reality in my life? And it's a vision of hope that I have. So it's not a dark picture that I'm painting, but I'm seeing that this trauma, and the trauma isn't in just one area, it's in many different areas, and it's worldwide. So there's nowhere else you can run to and escape and say, oh, I'll be safer there. There just isn't another place. The only place of safety is to go deep inside and connect with that inner stillness that lies within the self. And so I'm saying that once we go on that inner journey, then we begin to see the inner core values that we'd forgotten about. Life had become so superficial, and it was like, instant gratification in so many different ways. And now you've come to a standstill. What is going on? And it's time to go within, time to explore, and even to find myself, but also maybe even to rediscover the relationship with the divine. Because certainly in the Western world, we've moved very far away from the subject of God. Death we started to talk about, but we still don't really talk about God. And I'm hoping that people are now going to come to that awareness, that realization that the only way to come back to a world in which there's normality, in which there's humanness and real love that exists between people, which there should be, which used to be, it's going to happen if we bring God into the picture. And our relationship with God is going to awaken our own inner values, but also our relationship with God is going to remind us of our connection with each other, of being members of one family, children of the one parent. And so I see that this is time to reflect. This is now time to awaken, and it's time to integrate spirituality, God, back into our lives so that then human life can be the way it should be.
Wonderful. I'm just going to say at this point that the chat box is open. So if you're listening to what our guests are saying in today's conversation and you'd like to join in, put a question, a comment, please feel free to do so, and we'll try and weave your questions and comments into our discussion. But Janki, if I can just come back to you, I'm wondering how we find that balance point between trying to offer help and support in a practical way to the crumbling world that we see around us, and there's no end of support that is needed there, at the same time as building a vision and working towards something new and positive and powerful. How do we walk those two paths at the same time?
If I have a vision and I want to make it real, then I have to do something practical now. The vision isn't going to manifest just like that. And so I see that it is only with both aspects that we can make our visions become real. And so say, for example, if I have a vision of a world of peace and harmony, and I think this is a vision that many of us share, that we want to have a world in which there is peace and harmony. Well, my life today has to be based on peace and non-violence on every level, in my thoughts, in the way in which I communicate with others, in the way in which I behave, non-violent to myself, but also non-violent to people, non-violent to the earth, to nature itself. Climate change is becoming more and more visible, and it's a very big issue that we're going to have to deal with. But we can, if we come together as a human family. And so non-violent towards the animals. So all of this is then going to make me move closer to my vision, to make it a reality. And I see how so much can happen just with transformation in one. Jan must have, how many millions must you have guided? One individual. Sarah, I know for a fact that many would say that they owe their life to you in a very practical way. And so every individual can make a huge amount of difference. And so whatever is the vision I have, let me take those steps that can make it become real. And it'll inspire everybody else around us too.
I think that's a wonderful reminder, because when we're faced with the enormity of the challenges, it's very easy to feel, you know, what can I as one individual do? But you're very clearly saying here that it only takes one person and you can make a difference. Jan, you're nodding there. And I know that for young people, they've really taken this message on board in the way that they live their life. And we've seen young people leading the way with plant-based diet, vegetarian food, ethical business, and many graduates are looking for work that is going to be meaningful. There's a sense of mission about what they want to go out into the world and do, rather than just make money, which previous generations might have been more concerned about. How do you sense a vision of the future in the young people in terms of how they see their own lives panning out?
In many ways, in a lot of what Sister Janki has already shared. I mean, as she brought to my mind a song that was sung to me when I left the Stafford circuit to go into ministry. And the song that we sing, it is, "Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me." And it is with me, with one person. And I think our students see that if each of those students are looking for jobs, looking for sustainable ways of living, and not, you know, plant-based diets and staying healthy, the world will change. You know, and we will change, and we will change. We said earlier that, you know, I lead a team of chaplains from many of the world faiths. When the students at university see leaders of world faiths standing together in peace and respect and love, that will help them to think about their future. At the graduation ceremony, the Vice-Chancellor's speech would always be, you know, you're privileged to be going away from here with academia behind you, but that won't be any good. Don't just go and look for a job that will give you the most money. You do something that will fulfill you as a person. In fulfilling yourself as a person, you fulfill others and enrich their lives. And the most important thing is to be kind. And without kindness, all the academic learning, all of the great riches that you can earn in going out there in the world of work, it won't change the world for the better. It is us as human beings that change, that are able to bring that change. And we can do that. For me, every morning I get up because of the faith I have in God, and through that faith, which is deep inside me, I wake up on a morning and say, so what can we do together today? And I think for the students at the university, it's what can we do for those students to show, you know, to help. We're very privileged to be at a time when they're soaking up all this knowledge and learning about life and changing from the young people that they are to become the young adults who are going out into the world of work. And it is for us all to be able to look at them and say, what can we share with you? What can we give you? What can we show you to help you as you make your way in the world, and to help the world to be a peaceful place without war, without violence, without evil? I hope that makes sense.
It absolutely does make sense. And, you know, we used to say that the challenges in the world were soul-sized. In other words, it took the whole of our soul now to address them. And perhaps what we're saying now is that the challenges in the world are actually God-sized, and we're going to need to embrace the whole of what we understand God to be, to try and tackle them. But Sarah, Sister Janti said that you had countless people who would say that they owe their life in a way, or their well-being to you. And that's not just referring to your work as a psychiatrist, but, you know, you've been instrumental in the Janki Foundation from its beginning. And of course, drawing inspiration from that one individual who brought about so much change in the world, Daddy Janki herself. And we're just coming up to the 2-year anniversary of Daddy's passing. What inspiration have you taken from Daddy, and how have you embodied that inspiration that one person can make a difference?
Gosh, you never quite know what question Philippa's going to throw at you. That's a deep one. I mean, before I get on to that, it was interesting that Janti and Jan started talking about God, because actually at the Royal College of Psychiatrists in May, I'm organising a conference on their behalf called The Bigger Picture. And we're looking at frameworks of mental health which can acknowledge and encompass the spiritual, because often people just say, well, it's just, you know, a brain problem or a biopsychosocial problem, but we're trying to say it's a biopsychosocial spiritual problem. And then out of that, we had a conversation exactly like what you were saying, Janti, where we're all different faiths around the table. We're all psychiatrists, but come from different faiths. And we said, gosh, you know, God is the most important relationship for a lot of us around that table. We never talk about it. And so next year they asked me if I'd run a conference about God. So that's the challenge I have now, you know, the fact that it's a very important relationship that people have in their lives, and it cuts, you know, it goes through all faiths and all faith groups and none, you know, people who feel they're spiritual and have a connection with the divine. So that's going to be an interesting challenge. And bringing it back to your question, so I think that's what one of the things I really took from Daddy was her love for God, and how that relationship was just central to her whole life and her whole being, and her ability, and this has come up recently in some of our teachings, that ability to not judge people, you know, really to stay loving, to stay connected, regardless of, you know, if you've maybe made mistakes or done things that weren't so good. You never felt that sense of judgment from her. You always felt to be encouraged and loved, and I really believe in that. I believe that love is such a great motivator. And so if you can, in spite of anyone's behavior, or in spite of what you, in a sense, you might have likes or dislikes, if you can really neither condone nor condemn, you know, to be able to really have that spiritual vision of each other, to me, that is really empowering and uplifting, and that's what I felt Daddy did, that anyone in front of her felt they were special, they were valued, they were loved, they were appreciated, and that is what helped them face their challenges or come out of their suffering.
I can imagine if Daddy were here now, she would say, well, it wasn't me that did anything, it was me as an instrument of the divine. And that was her secret, was that she worked very much co-creating everything she did as an instrument of the divine, and that was one of her very special gifts. We have had some questions coming in, so I'd like to turn to them now. Don't forget, there is time for you still to put your question or comment. This is somebody saying to you, Sarah, that they're very grateful that you talked about how the system has to look after the social care workers, people in society with the lowest status. What needs to happen for the system to look after these people? Do we begin with kindness, love and compassion? when we're looking at the care system, but what about the most vulnerable people? And I think this is an important question, because what we're hearing that is going to be coming down the track is people more and more on the absolute poverty line, on the hunger line, people being pushed into desperate situations because of the rising cost of living, because the cost of utilities. We're looking at a really well, what is the word? I mean, it's going to be so difficult. And this conversation very much has been around people who are still okay. But what is our response to people who are being pushed to a place where day-to-day living is no longer okay, and there's no prospect of it becoming okay anytime soon? What is our response there? I'll put that to any one of you.
If I may speak, I think a response would be that if our voices go silent, we're letting the vulnerable down. So we are, all of us, in positions, I think, where we can speak to people who may be able to change systems, and the people that we know in our networking. We've got to be the voice for the vulnerable, the voice for those who are voiceless. We've got to stand up and be counted. And a phrase we use in Christianity is we have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And and just small things, like my sign off on my university email says, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. And the remarks I've had that has come through on the end of an email, it makes a difference. But we are in positions, and we've got to look at the others who are in the positions to be able to be that voice where there is no voice. And we've seen some remarkable people do that throughout the pandemic and throughout this time of war. When we look at Marcus Rashford, who spoke up about feeding children when there were no free school meals, and the charitable giving of people who have walked when they've got no legs, who have done everything that they possibly can to highlight an injustice and to try and resolve and have the ones who can make changes, make those changes. And I've got a saying up on my wall in my office, and I hope I pronounced this lady's name right, Maya Angelou.
Maya Angelou.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, people won't remember what we said or did, they will remember how we made them feel. And with making the vulnerable feel even more vulnerable, we need to do something about that. Yeah.
Sarah, we'll come to you in a moment with the response to social care workers in particular. But Sister Janti, if I can come to you first, in a way, it feels like the pandemic began the process of opening our hearts to compassion for others. But that now, with the situation, seeing the suffering in Ukraine, that has just opened even further. And there's been a huge response from people in the UK to offering their homes to displaced families from the Ukraine. And I know that, compassion is one of the steps on the spiritual journey of being able to think about the needs of the other. And you're sat there in Mount Abu, where there's just hugely inspiring things going on with 4 hospitals that now offer treatment to people free of charge, outreach programs with buses that go out to support the vulnerable. The Brahma Kumaris is really leading the way in a compassionate response to challenging times. Could you say a few words about that?
Earlier on, Sarah used this word compassion deficit, and I see that there's so many different things going on. It's very easy to run dry. And so I think that what we are sharing with people is the fact that first and foremost, you have to keep that connection with the divine so that then you're being replenished and you never run dry. You're able to continually have that love, that compassion, and that care that you can share with others. And so this is what enables work to continue without a break, because otherwise it's so easy to get to a state of burnout. But that Janki was an amazing model in this, that she was just tireless through till age 104. She was still serving then. And so I think that that's maybe one of the most important signals. First, keep that connection so that that energy can continually flow through you and reach out. And I appreciate very much the comment about kindness that Jan made, because you don't have to give money. Maybe you don't have money. Maybe you have some food that you can give. Well, offer that. But also, maybe if you just have a kind word for somebody, if you just have a moment to stop and smile and have an exchange, which is not just of the eyes, but when you look at somebody, you're actually touching their hearts. And so if you were to spend just a moment doing this, maybe it would give somebody hope for the future. Maybe it would remind them that, yes, there are human beings who care. And so all of that, of course, is happening. But yes, we are also making sure that the indigenous people around us, it's a very poor area, a tribal area. So we make sure that we provide employment for multi-thousands, I would say. We've got 3 campuses, and especially the one at the bottom of the mountain. I just heard yesterday that they employ 2,000 people. And so whatever it is we can do to support and help, we can do that. But the most important thing is to raise their consciousness so that then they know that whatever is going on today isn't going to continue forever. There has to come a transformation. There will be an end to this darkness. There is light and the dawn has broken. I'm not just hoping that it has, but I know I see so many signals that there is a new consciousness in the world. You mentioned a few things earlier about activism and young people and so on, but I see that really there is a new way of thinking in which people are recognizing that the inner being is the most important, and it is that inner being that has to be acknowledged, recognized, nourished and strengthened, so that then we work from inside out. And so, of course, our work is focused very much on that, but we are aware of climate change and we're using renewable energies for the last 20 years plus. So external things are important. We've got a very interesting thing going on, yogic agriculture. You know, I hope I'm not taking too much time in detail, but just this last point that people have heard about organic agriculture, but some years ago, a farmer in Maharashtra, where there had been drought and people had been farmers had been committing suicide. He and his family were meditators. And so they thought about what it is they could do to show there's still hope for the future. So they decided to go back to ancient methods. And ancient methods, of course, meant that you would pray at every step along the time, from the plowing of the fields to be able to then sow the seeds and water them and then harvest them. There was prayer and meditation all along the way. And to their very pleasant surprise, what they found was that it was not just an idea that was nice, but it actually proved to have tangible results. And so the seeds were well nourished, were more nourishing than normal food, and whatever were the biospheres below the earth, the bacteria that were needed were stronger, and the bacteria that were dangerous and harmful were being eliminated without pesticides, without chemicals. And so there's a whole wave of yogic agriculture that's being started. And so, yes, there's many different things one can do, but the most important is the awareness that one has.
I think the metaphor, the analogy that you've just given us there of planting seeds with the consciousness of love and the consciousness of the divine, in a way that is our take-home message from our discussion today in terms of newness, is that whatever it is we're doing, if we can do it with that connection to love, that connection to the divine source of love, then the results will be very different. So thank you for sharing that, Sister Janti. That's a beautiful thought for us to carry away. Sarah, in terms of social care workers, those who are working at the bottom of the hierarchy, what is our approach to supporting and helping people on the margins? But also I'm wondering, is there a new currency that we are beginning to foster of actually values? And money is one thing, but it doesn't give you peace of mind. It doesn't give you a stress-free life. It doesn't give you freedom from anxiety. And that maybe what we're seeing is a greater value placed on these qualities, the qualities of our being, rather than just on our bank balance.
Yes, I mean, it's difficult to talk about the vulnerable and the role of social care without it becoming a political issue. And I think there's definitely that aspect of it. And the fact that so many individuals have done initiatives of their own bat, which some people would say, you know, the state really should be managing those. It shouldn't take a footballer to have free meals in school, you know, really. So it does all the work that these wonderful, I mean, we had Red Nose Day yesterday, didn't we? They raised 42 million or something. I mean, it's fantastic generosity of the public. But there is a sense that, you know, should these gaps be so obvious that they need individuals to come up with ideas to fill them? Maybe they do, but there is a feeling that people in those roles of caring for others, of going into their homes, cooking their meals, washing them, dressing them, you know, the really kind of nitty-gritty work, that needs to also have adequate monetary, you know, compensation, and until that's recognized and that kind of work is recompensed on a similar level to other professionals, it needs that kind of recognition. So you know, I think we do have to fight for that. We do have to really, as a society, value and appreciate the hard work that social care does. One small thing that the Janki Foundation did, we've devised an app, a mobile phone app for social and healthcare professionals called Happy Dote. So we felt we thought about all the challenging situations that we face at work, and then we just created these little 3-minute meditations as antidotes to those situations, which you can download on your phone. So again, it's back to trying, for both health and social care professionals, trying to help them survive and thrive in a very challenging atmosphere at the moment. But then there are many professions that are challenged at the moment. And so as individuals, we can help them. I mean, you know, the clapping for the NHS, again, initially that was appreciated, but then people got a bit cynical about it because it was, you know, they need more than just clapping. So I think there are actions and activism, and so what we do, where we put our money, where we walk our talk, is very, very important, and how we support people in social care is incredibly important.
And, you know, in a way, we're moving to a consciousness that recognizes that none of us can thrive unless all of us thrive. And we have to bring the whole of humanity with us on this journey of renewal with no exceptions. We've arrived at a point where we're going to move into an experience of some of the qualities that we've been sharing in today's program. And I'd like to invite Sister Janki to share with us some thoughts as we do that, picking up on this theme of, despite everything that we see going on around us, there is still hope for a brighter world, a more positive future. This idea of it feeling good to take action when we feel things aren't right. There's always something that you can do, even if it's just a smile or a word of encouragement, and that it's as Sarah has just been saying, finding a way of bringing those values into the work that you do, that also brings in the awareness of the divine. So Sister Janki, if I can hand over to you for our time of reflection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philippa. I'm going to invite you to follow some thoughts that I share, and I hope they're useful to guide you into that reflective mode. Sitting quietly, just focusing my attention inwards, I feel that inner stillness draw my attention. I focus there, a state of stillness, a state of peace. And in this awareness of peace, I feel the presence of the source, the divine, the supreme. And from that being, I experience the light that reaches me, the light of love, the light of peace, the light of hope. The love of the divine ignites hope in my heart. And in the presence of the divine, I find mind, my thoughts, my feelings, my awareness, and my physical human frame all become aligned. And there's a feeling of well-being. Heart and soul, mind and body are all being cared for. Filling myself with truth, with love, with peace. I know there will be a better world. I know with this new consciousness, a new awareness that we now have, will surely transform the world and create a world of truth, peace, and love. I hold this vision of a better world, And I take the help of the divine to transform all that I need to transform within myself, so that I too can co-create that better world. Holding this awareness and this feeling, I come back to the consciousness of the physical domain, but now filled with the qualities of the divine. Om Shanti. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Janki. We can use words all day long, but there's nothing that can give the experience of a time of stillness, meditation, and silence. So thank you for leading us into that. Our time together is drawing to a close. We're going to be sharing a few useful contact website addresses for you and details of Sarah's book. But before we do that, any last comment from you, Sarah, in terms of any newness that you're hoping to invite into your life with this arrival of spring and sense of renewal that's in the air at the moment?
Well, I was reading something recently where they suggested that you give yourself real space and time to connect with yourself and maybe say no to being too busy. So for me, a sense of newness is creating that space where I can just be in silence and be still and really feel that loving connection and not get too busy. So next time someone asks me to do a webinar like this, I'll probably say no.
Well, we're glad you didn't for this time. It was our good fortune that you were with us today. So thank you so much, Sarah. Jan, how about you? Any newness that you're inviting into your life for this time of spring?
Well, as for Christians, we're actually travelling the journey through Lent. And as we travel through that journey, each year I try my utmost to bring in that newness and a new connection with God, and to just renew afresh as we walk that journey towards Easter. And of course, being at the university as well this year, Easter and Ramadan overlap. And again, you know, some of the fasting and the breaking of the fast that is shared during Ramadan, it all brings this richness into who we are and into that journey that we're traveling with our God. Yeah.
Wonderful. Special time of year indeed in the Christian calendar. Sister Janki, how about you? What newness are you inviting into your life?
Something very practical that I'm thinking about and wondering how to make it happen. A little bit more physical exercise, maybe.
Fantastic.
Let's see how it works out, but that's definitely on my mind.
Well, I can see Sarah very much in agreement with the importance of exercise. Mind, body, as well as spirit have to be nurtured and maintained. So some lovely ideas for newness, and you know, for each of us, maybe we can think about what newness we want to invite into our life at this time of renewal. So thank you so much to all my guests for today. Sister Janki joining us from from India, to Sarah, and to Deacon Jan Sutton as well in Loughborough. It's been a fascinating conversation and a beautiful way to round off our Honouring Life series. Thanks so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. So if we can maybe just share on the screen a couple of web addresses, if any of the issues that we've touched on today have left you feeling that you would like to know more. These are the details of Sarah's book, Stillness in the Storm, 7 Tools for Coping with Fear and Uncertainty. It's a very practical book that will give you the tools to empower yourself. And you can find more information on this book at the Janki Foundation. And there is the web address there, www.jankifoundation.org. You can also find details of that book on the Inspired Stillness website. This is the Brahma Kumaris publishing house. There are also books there by Sister Janti, if you'd like to follow up more on some of the thoughts that Sister Janti was sharing, www.inspiredstillness.com. That's lovely. And now if we can just move on to the next slide. Here we are with more information if you'd like to follow up on the Janki Foundation, or if you'd like to see any of the recordings of earlier events, you can do so here at www.jankifoundation.org. And of course, there'll be details of any future events posted here on this website. Or if you're inspired to find out more about the work of the Brahma Kumaris, which we've touched on in today's conversation, the website there is www.brahmakumaris.org. And there will be plenty of meditations, if that is what you need, inspiration to take the next step on your spiritual journey. You can find it right there. So all that remains now is for me to thank you for joining us, to thank the whole of the Honouring Life team for bringing this whole series of events to our attention, and to say, see you next time. Keep finding hope, keep finding purpose, keep finding newness in your life. And we look forward to being together again one day very soon. Take care, goodbye, and Om Shanti.
Where do I go with all these feelings and all these faces and open doors, when everyone else seems so serene and I just feel so insecure? And where do I go when all the pieces of my heart lay on the floor? You say, come into the light, why don't you? Come into the light, why don't you? Come on now, come into the light. Where do I go with all these memories and all these bags filled up with shame? And how should I feel when you call me an angel and dress me in a crown of gold? And what should I do when tears of sorrow just won't stay inside these eyes? You say, come into the light, why don't you? Come into the light, why don't you? Come on now, come into the light. What should I do when a gentle-headed reaches out to take my own? And how How should I feel when tears of joy, they just won't stay inside these eyes? And what will